Gainwell trying to get around the edge, and Kenneth Gainwell explodes all the way for another touchdown.
It sounds like lately the hype is that he's the Eagles' featured back right now.
Could it be possible that we have been sleeping on the biggest sleeper that there is?
I just don't buy the hype that he'll actually be the guy when it's all said and done.
Gainwell runs another 5 balls out.
What are you doing with Kenny Gainwell?
What does Kenneth Gainwell have in his bag?
If it's up to me, it's a no-brainer, but they love themselves some Kenny Gainwell.
What a difference a year can make. In one offseason, fans are talking about how Kenneth Gainwell could be the RB1. And the next offseason, people are hoping he's cut for UDFA. With Gainwell in the last year of his rookie contract, the Eagles went out and drafted Will Shipley in the 4th round. And naturally, a lot of people think Shipley will beat him out. But is it right to assume that Will Shipley is just going to come in and take the RB2 job? Well, let's first look at his game to see what he brings to the table right now. Personally, I think the best part of Will Shipley's game is his vision. Despite being an undersized back, he's more than capable of running in between the tackles due to his ability to set up and play off of his blocks. Let's set the scene for this play. Clemson comes out in a trips formation, and with the back to the trip side, this is a high alert for an RPO. North Carolina wants to play a too-high safety coverage, so in order to stay gapped out against the run and not have a defender in a run-pass conflict for the RPO, they sling the run fits. What this means is the linebacker is walked out and is not in the run fit, and instead the weak safety will replace his B-gap responsibility. Technically, they're down a gap if the quarterback were to be involved in some type of option play, but there's tools the defense could use to handle that. Let's look at the tight view. The defense has set the 3 technique opposite of the running back, and we can see the run fits a little easier now. Clemson is going to run inside zone towards the 3 technique, but now the offense has a decision to make. The center can work towards the 3 technique to secure the first level in case he stunts inside, and then move up to the linebacker if the defensive tackle doesn't slant inside. But if that happens, it's very likely that the other defensive tackle that's lined up on the inside shade of the guard and a 2-wide technique will close off the space that the center is vacating. This play against Florida State shows a great example of what I'm talking about. When the center works towards the 3 technique, notice how the defensive tackle lined up as a 2-eye is able to close off the A-gap. Back to the first clip. This time, instead of escaping the center to the play side, they're going to have him rock back on the 2-eye and help the guard secure the gap. Shipley understands the blocking assignment and how to help open up the gap with his movement. He presses his gap play side to help force a linebacker to step up to the center. Then, he uses a small jump cut backside. This helps the guard secure the block because his movement influences the defensive tackle to move from his assigned A gap to the backside B gap, and Shipley has a ton of space to work with now. At this point in time, a ton of young backs would see this linebacker closing off the frontside A gap and cut back to the backside B gap that appears to be wide open. But Shipley understands that the defense is slinging the run fit by bringing in a safety late, and he'd be running right into an unblocked defender. So he stays tight to the offensive line and finds the open gap that he helps create. Once he gets to the second level, you can see his eyes scanning the rest of the defense. He runs hard up the field to influence the safeties to close in on him, which opens up space for him to make a cut and find extra yards. Let's go back to that Florida State clip again. A ton of young backs would see this open B gap and cut back to it right away, especially since his primary and secondary reads on the defensive line are telling him that's where he should be going. But he sees the linebacker fall back into the B gap and trusts that his center is going to work back with that linebacker's movement, and he ends up colliding with the defensive tackle, closing off the A gap, and he's able to find enough space to eke out a solid 5-yard gain. His patience, tempo, vision, and understanding of the blocking scheme allows him to find space that many young runners can't. In the NFL, defenses are much more gap sound, so understanding how to find space is incredibly important. When the defense is able to clog up the middle, a lot of young backs will try to bounce this run outside and outrace a defender to the edge. Jahmyr Gibbs was incredible at this coming out of college, but there's very few Jahmyr Gibbs walking around the planet, and often they will run themselves into trouble, especially when they get into the NFL. Shipley, on the other hand, is great at getting north and south. On this play, we see him running with great tempo as he presses the run to the heels of the offensive line. The backside guard is late getting to the linebacker that's filling downhill fast, so Shipley is forced to use a jump cut to the outside. Instead of abandoning the play design, he stays tight to the tackle and squeezes the run back inside to pick up several more yards. Notice how he actually works away from that unblocked defender, knowing that he has space to work back inside since he pressed the run to the heels of the offensive lineman, which forced the linebackers to step up into his blockers. Shipley has an innate feel for where the second and third level defenders will be pursuing from. This allows him the ability to make confident cuts and weave through the defense when he gets past the line of scrimmage. In addition to that, Will Shipley will have value as a receiver. You can tell he's comfortable catching the ball as he often has to extend to catch off-target passes, and he's able to do so without breaking stride. This allows him to quickly pierce up the field after catching the ball. He's shown the ability to make plays on passes down the field as well, but it's not something he was asked to do a lot. Here's the thing though, Shipley's vision and ability to cut and weave through traffic will have to be what carries him because he's not the most dynamic runner with the ball in his hands. If you look at the final season of all the running backs drafted in the past 5 classes, his yards after contact and his missed tackles forced metrics are not what you'd hope for, although his explosive run rate is a little better in large part due to his vision. Statistically, his 2022 season was his best year, and even then, his numbers wouldn't put him in the top half of running backs drafted in the past 5 years. If he's in open space or running with some momentum, Shipley can make a guy miss or run over defensive backs, but he's not stringing a bunch of moves together and he's often brought down by arm tackles. If there is an unblocked defender in the hole, Shipley is likely not going to make them miss or fall forward for many yards. Having said all of this, how does Kenneth Gainwell compare and why do the Eagles trust him so much? Well, you have to ask yourself, what do you want out of your backup running backs? Of course, you would like a high-end 1-2 punch like Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, or more recently like the David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, or Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane combos, but the reality is, most running back rooms aren't that strong. If that's the case, like with the Eagles, then you really want a backup that can give your starter a breather, make the play that is available, and most importantly, don't put the ball on the ground. The Eagles like Gainwell because he doesn't create negative plays for the offense, for the most part. Since entering the league in 2021, among backs with at least 50 carries, he is ranked in the top half in yards per attempt in every season. To further illustrate that he doesn't put the offense in bad positions, Gainwell had a lower stuff rate than DeAndre Swift. Stuffs are plays where the runner gains 0 or less yards on a rush. He did this despite having a higher rate of being hit at the line of scrimmage. Swift was much more prone to dancing in the backfield to try to create a bigger play, whereas Gainwell was more likely to try to get downhill and take what was available. This is also a reason why Gainwell was their preferred short yardage back for much of the season. The year before, his numbers were far better than Miles Sanders in the same categories. But the problem with Gainwell is that he doesn't create a ton of big plays for himself. He definitely has shown the ability to rip off chunk gains when the opportunity presents itself, but like Shipley, he's not super dynamic with the ball in his hands. Over the past 2 seasons, when he was a primary backup, despite ranking 14th in explosive run rate in each season, his yards after contact and missed tackles forced per run have been modest at best and actually pretty bad for the most part. Like I said, he gets what is available, but often doesn't create much more. And in my eyes, a big part of that is due to the fact that he is trying to accomplish the most important job of a running back, which is not fumbling the football. All over the film, you will see Gainwell running through the hole with both hands on the football. Even in open space, he takes care to put both hands on the ball. It's great to see him protecting the ball, but it is often a detriment to creating bigger plays. Take this play for example. Gainwell starts to cover up well before contact and ultimately gets brought down by an arm tackle from behind. If Gainwell was a bit more aggressive and held the ball with one hand, I think he's able to open up and run fast enough to not get caught here. By going into a protective shell, it also reduces his ability to cut back in the open field. The problem is, Gainwell had 1 fumble in his first 2 seasons, but 3 in the last season alone. So if he's not going to be dynamic with the ball in his hands, and he's going to fumble a lot, well, it's going to be hard for him to hold on to the backup role. But Shipley isn't much better protecting the football. In fact, Shipley fumbled the ball 8 times in his career at Clemson. His fumble rate against college defenders was slightly higher than Gainwell's fumble rate against NFL defenders. Comparatively, Gainwell's fumble rate in college was almost half of Shipley's. In all honesty, Shipley is lucky he didn't fumble more often. All over the film, you can see him being careless with the ball in his hands. Ideally, you want the back to hold the ball tight to their body with their hand above the wrist, with their wrist above their elbow. But Shipley is often running with the ball dangling out for anyone to poke it away. Very LaShawn McCoy-like, just without the all-time elite LaShawn McCoy elusiveness. In addition to that, Both Gainwell and Shipley are good receiving backs, but Shipley has to get better in pass protection or he's not going to see the field much. Gainwell isn't the greatest pass blocker, but he's better than Shipley. Misblocking assignments and poor technique litters Will's film. And on top of that, he needs to add more play strength to hold his ground against defenders. He's often pushed back into the lap of the quarterback. As a result, he's much more reliant on cut blocks, but if he resorts to cutting the majority of the time, NFL defenders will be prepared to sprawl and sidestep him. Here, we see an example against Florida Atlantic, where he tries to throw a cut block when the defender has way too much space. He's able to get a piece of the linebacker here, but with this much space, NFL linebackers are going to olay the block by turning their hips and taking away that inside leg, while also probably using their hands to shove Shipley into the ground. As a runner, I think Shipley has better vision and understanding of how to set up his blocks than Gainwell. Rarely do I watch a play and think Gainwell hit the wrong hole, but he is often too urgent to hit the hole, so he doesn't press his landmarks long enough, which exposes his linemen as they don't have enough time to secure the first level before working up to the linebackers or safeties on the second level. But Shipley has to get better protecting the ball and protecting the quarterback when he's asked to block. Those two factors are what I think gives Gainwell the edge in the RB2 battle. Considering Gainwell's on the last year of his rookie deal, I viewed the Shipley pick as more of a redshirt type of year so that he is ready to take over the RB2 role after Gainwell departs, very similar to how Gainwell's career started. But if Shipley shows improvement in both areas, don't be surprised if we see him take on a bigger role as the season progresses.